In this video, we strive to remain spoiler-free, discussing only story and plot elements from the books relevant to what has occurred already on the show. When necessary, a spoiler warning with a countdown will be given.
Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca.
I'm Max.
And I'm the Geeky Hippie. Welcome back to What the Adaptation. We're the YouTube channel that reviews adaptations from one format to another. This week, we start on season 2 of Netflix's The Witcher with the episode A Grain of Truth, based on the short story A Grain of Truth, which you can find in The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. What did everybody think of this one?
So I just rewatched it, and I think I enjoyed it a little bit more on a second watch. The story, A Grain of Truth, is definitely one of my least favorites of the short stories. So that might have just kind of influenced my initial view of the episode, but I think that it improved quite a bit on it for me. So overall, pretty decent episode. Although I was like initially just, I think like, oh, why do they want to start with that like in the beginning of the season? Like that just surprised me a bit. And maybe just because it wasn't one of my favorites, but
Does it have anything to do with how
improved.
problematic a certain character is?
Yes, that's definitely a big part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later without using a certain word.
Yes, right. We won't
I can always
get ourselves in trouble on YouTube. Right. Yeah.
I don't want to have to delete anything.
No.
So I enjoyed the episode fairly well, actually, despite the issues with Nivellen. I really, I like the short story. Okay, it's not one of my favorites in the books either, but I did like the episode a lot more than the short story.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think part of that is Christopher Heaview's performance. Everybody remembers him as was a Thormund Giantsbane in Game of Thrones. The big guy with the red beard. He was pretty good. He was pretty good in this episode. I think he kind of gave it a bit of a charm. And for me, I was really surprised at the makeup and CG work as the Beast.
Pretty good.
That looked pretty good for a TV show.
Yeah.
So much better in the film than last season.
Oh yeah, much better.
Yeah, there were still a shot or two where it was a little wonky. But other than that, it was shots like where you could tell it was CG making everything move. That he was wearing a mask, but the mask didn't actually move when he talked, so they had to animate it with CG. But yeah, I think he was why I liked this episode more.
That could be for me.
There's a couple other little things. Actually, one of the changes I really like surprise people.
Okay.
Let's jump on to changes. You guys ready to jump into?
Max, what did you think about the episode?
Oh, I'm sorry, Max.
I would say I liked the episode, and like it was all around decent. Like there was no bad Ciri scenes where she's off doing her own thing and just like boring, I want to see Geralt kind of thing.
We've moved past that, yes.
Yeah. And the story wise, like his character aside of why he got cursed, like I like parts of that and the aspect of how the curse worked, the magic house, that kind of stuff for world building. I like that part of the story.
Okay. Cool. So yeah, let's talk about changes. Glenn, what do you got?
Well, first, I like the inclusion of Ciri in the Nivellen storyline. It gives you access to seeing a different side of the Bruxa, Vereena.
Yeah.
Because she was actually, she sure came off as in she liked Ciri and not as a want to eat, drink her dry like liked her. I mean, she left off the dress and all that.
I think that added quite a bit too.
I liked seeing the aftermath at Sodden Hill, which is not something that's shown in the books, anywhere in the books. Really kind of thought it was neat to say is going to the dead men and seeing their last couple seconds of life. And like, that's not a job I would want. I would not be wanting to, all to find Yennefer. And that's kind of, I don't see any plot holes from these changes that I did like. But yeah, the rest is stuff that I don't like, the big changes that I noticed.
Okay. All right, well, maybe we'll get changes that Max that you liked, and then we'll come back to the ones we don't like.
Well, obviously the part I liked was how they either changed or glossed over why he was cursed in the show versus the book.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't know if he was telling the whole truth in the show,
Right.
Yeah.
or if that was he just trashed the place and that's why he got cursed.
Didn't he in the show?
No,
Didn't he say they did that?
yeah. So what happened in the show? It was different, and this is one of the
Yeah.
changes that I think did help in a way. He initially tells them that he destroyed the temple, and
Right.
that's why he was cursed by the priestess. And then he's very cagey throughout the whole episode. Like Geralt can kind of tell that he's not wanting to talk about things, and he's keeps trying to like get information out of him. And then finally, after the curse is lifted, he admits that he
Yep.
R-worded the priestess. And that is really why he was cursed, not for destroying the temple.
Mhm.
And but the big difference that I felt, and this was a change that I think improved on the situation in this short story, is when he tells them the truth, like they're not forgiving of that. They
Mhm.
are they turn away from him and they leave, and then there's some consequences to that. And I felt like in the short story, the fact that that was his history, it ended up feeling very, very glossed over because he's portrayed as a likable character. You know, he has some charm, and he's Geralt's friend, and you almost it's like you're sort of being asked to feel sorry for him for being cursed, and he did something when he was
But is he
young that he
cursed?
regrets.
Is he cursed? Yeah, he looks like a monster,
Y-
but he
Yeah.
doesn't have to do anything. He gets everything he wants except company.
In the book, yeah. No,
And in the story. And in the story, except, she's drinking them dry. So I don't even count Vereena, but
yeah, I hear what you're
everything's
saying.
there for him.
I think even more so, you're right, in the story, but it's not much of a curse. Yeah. So
No, it's
that's
not really.
that was how I felt about it, especially in the book, of like, okay, like there's really like things kind of work out for him, and like he's not really like such a bad guy, and yet the reason why he's supposedly cursed was something pretty horrible.
Mhm.
And so like I guess the way it was handled in the show, I felt like it shows that, I mean, yes, he's deeply ashamed of it, he doesn't want to say it, and there's a very big difference in how Geralt and Ciri react to him when they hear that he destroyed a temple versus doing something so horrible to the priestess. So I felt like it was not treated as lightly in the show as it was in the book.
Okay. I think there may be a reason for it being taken more seriously on the show, considering the showrunner is a woman.
Yeah, that might have helped. Yeah.
Yeah. That short story is one of the examples of where the first book, Last Wish, is problematic.
Yeah. And that's a big reason why I don't like that particular story, is it's like you want me to kind of like feel sorry for this guy or like this guy, and like it's just we're supposed to brush aside like what he did to end up in that situation.
Right.
And it's like, no, I don't really want to do that. So yeah, much better how that was all handled in the show, in my opinion. When I was first watching it, and he gives the part about how he destroyed the temple, at first I was like, oh, okay, so they changed that, and it makes him less of a like someone who should be a villain, right? Like,
Right.
But then when they got to the end, I was like, no, you know what? It's even better, because like they're acknowledging the real reason, but just the reaction to it is different and gives it more the weight that it deserves. So, and it actually is pretty dark at the end, I thought, because I mean, here's this man who wants to end his life because of how horrible he feels, and Geralt saying to him basically, "You're immortal now, you know, have at
Yeah.
it." And that's pretty dark. It's a pretty dark ending of the episode.
Well, yeah, him killing the woman he loved and who loved him,
Yeah,
because that is dark too.
yeah, it is. Right. And you know, the curse sort of being that he had to lose love in order to look like himself again. I mean, basically nothing good comes of that. So I don't know, it seemed a bit more like a bit more like a curse, and certainly deserved, and reacted to with a little bit more gravity. So yeah, overall it was better. A good adaptation of that particular story, which has a lot of problems.
Yeah.
I said maybe the curse was breaking the curse.
Yeah, it is, right? In a way, it's almost worse. Yeah, that's a good point.
But when I'd watched the show just prior to this, apparently at the end I didn't have subtitles on, so I didn't quite hear what he had said.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so
Yeah,
right.
he did
So
say.
so I missed that whole part about that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry that
Yeah.
happened to you, mate. Always have subtitles on.
Yep.
I will not watch the show if I cannot have subtitles with it. So, next question. What did we dislike? I don't
As
want to
far
go
as
first.
changes go, you don't want to go first. Okay.
No.
I mean, as far as anything that's like a change, I mean, the only thing that I would say is like it's just somewhat maybe not ideal to me is like starting the season again with this particular story. Like it's sort of delaying.
Good stuff.
Yeah, like it's delaying the beginning of Blood of Elves, you know, just getting into like what is happening. It's not so much with like Yennefer as part of the story, because I think that's good stuff to have in there. But with Geralt and Ciri, it's sort of delaying them getting to Kaer Morhen and just sort of moving their story ahead. So that would be the only thing where I think there's some downside to it. I mean, I don't mind it overall, because again, I think they improved on the source material. And when we get to talk about theme, I'll talk about how I do think this episode handled theme very well. But it did kind of just delay getting to what's happening in this season. So
Next.
Can't think of anything offhand that really stood out as disliking.
Well, that's good. That's good. I got 3 of them then, so I'll make up for you.
Okay.
They're not big. They're not strong dislikes. It's just like, it's not that I hate them. I just dislike. Like
Okay.
on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe a 4 or a 5.
Mhm.
First is Cahir and Yennefer both being prisoners of the opposing forces.
Okay.
And that throws a wrench in how some things could play out down the road. I mean, yeah, you have to do something for Yennefer, so I get that, but I just didn't like her being a prisoner of the Nilfgaardians. I also didn't like the fact that they made Nivellen an old friend of, or an old acquaintance at least, of Geralt's.
Wasn't he already in the
No,
book?
in the books
No?
they didn't know each other because they had they exchanged names. They didn't trust each other when they first met.
Oh my gosh, you're right. I didn't re-listen to the story right before, so I forgot about that.
I thought the boar hunt thing was related to the books, wasn't it? Or not the boar hunt, the monster hunt thing. Wasn't that in there? Or with his father? Or was that a different character?
The
that was never.
when that whole
Yeah,
story about
the
how
monster. No, the wyvern. No, I don't think that story's anywhere. I don't remember it being anywhere in the books. I get why they did it though, because it's to help make Nivellen sympathetic at the start, which is to make it hurt later on.
The other thing it does is like it just speeds things up, right? You don't have to take up a bunch of the episode to like, talk to this guy. And like, I mean, and would Geralt really take the risk of staying with someone that he didn't know? who look like that, like with Ciri with him. It's one thing for himself. It's another thing to have Ciri with him and to
Fair point.
take that risk. So I think I overall like that change. I hadn't thought about it as a change, but now that I'm thinking of it, I think it makes sense.
The one thing that does cause potential black holes is what they're doing with Cahir. And it's not just this episode, it's what I know that they do with him all season long. Same with what I know they do with Yennefer all season long. But specifically with this episode, it's more plot holes coming up with, Cahir being just, he's got a story arc in the books that I'm having a hard time understanding how he's going to follow something close to that trajectory. Same with Yennefer. Knowing what this season does, and which is all based on what this episode starts off with, of having her a prisoner of the Nilfgaardians, it's gonna. Have either of you gotten to Thanet yet? The Isle of Thanet in the books?
I think so.
Okay.
What book is that in?
It's either the one at Time of Contempt or the one after Time of Contempt. Tower of the Swallow. I think it might be at the beginning of Tower.
I've read A Time of Contempt. I haven't read past that.
Okay.
But I can't.
Okay. Yeah,
maybe I know what you're talking about.
When you get to the events of the Isle of Thanet with the Welsh pronunciation, it's two D's at the end. When you get to there, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
If you've read that, you would totally know what I'm talking about.
It's just the name. I think I know what you're talking about, but now I'm not sure because if the name isn't ringing a bell. So now I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's something that happened on that island during a big conclave of magicians.
Yeah.
That you've read that, and so you know. Yes.
It's just I didn't remember the name of the island.
Okay.
I guess, so.
The things built the role that Yennefer plays there and after. Well, they're putting her in. They've accelerated by 2 books with her storyline, and basically did it without Thanet, because Thanet is the reason for what happens then, and they're now making it spoilers. So I'm going to put spoiler up on it. They're making it so that she can't be trusted enough to show up at Thanet with Ciri, and for Ciri to do what she did, and Yennefer to do what she did, and Geralt to do what he did. And that causes them all problems after that book. And I mean, it's actually the driving thrust of why Ciri ends up having the storyline she has. And by doing this, I'm like, how?
You just don't know where that's going to lead, basically.
I don't know how they're going to lead to her. Yeah.
I can't speak to Kay here because, like, as far as I'm concerned in the show, he's still just kind of like mostly like a blank to me. Like, I mean, I get, a very like basic sense of his character, but like beyond that, it's just kind of like, okay. I mean,
his personality
about this dude.
That doesn't even have a personality.
He doesn't really have personality in the show.
No,
and like
he's mean. Well, he's an asshole on the show. He's mean.
Yeah. And he's obsessed with the White Flame, and that's all I know about him.
Yeah, he's not like that in the book.
And this is the first episode where I felt like I was kind of like really getting more of like Fringilla, and like, okay, like I'm getting more of her, and so that was good, but I'm not getting that with Kay here. All right, so best scene of the episode. Max, do you want to start?
Sorry to hear you.
Best scene of the episode.
Kind of tricky.
Okay.
Let's just do the knife throwing scene.
Oh, okay.
I'll let you have that one, so I won't pick it then.
Okay.
That was one of the 3 I'm trying to pick from. So.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna pick then, and then because you've got 3. So
yeah. Go for it.
Mine was the scene between Ciri and Vereena when they talk about what it means to be a monster.
Okay. All right.
I think that wasn't like gets like nicely onto the theme of the episode.
Yeah. That to the books, Geralt's the monster. And of course, the books have been talking for a long time, saying for a long time that mankind are the monsters.
Right.
I mean, it's so bloody obvious, and especially once you start reading The Blood of Elves, because it really slaps it home.
And I think like goes back to your point too about like the benefit of having Ciri in this particular story, as opposed to having the whole episode or that part of the episode just being Geralt and Nivellen, basically. You get more in this case. So yeah.
My favorite scene, well, I had three. One of them was the dagger throwing scene, which served real nicely to increase Geralt's suspicions of Nivellen. Because he knew right off the bat that Nivellen was cheating, so that he didn't have to answer any questions. Why are you not wanting to answer any questions, Nivellen?
Very suspicious.
I really enjoyed the dinner scene. I just enjoyed that. I'm a fan for dinner scenes and stuff. That so some of the best scenes and some of my favorite stuff have been dinner scenes. So, even most important scenes. What I really liked though was the Shadow Theater scene.
That was a very cool scene too.
That was endearing. I liked that.
Yeah, I wouldn't have. I mean, that one stood out to me, but I didn't pick it just because it was a cool looking scene. I was a little less clear on how exactly that's like tied into the episode, but it was.
I don't remember the story. What the story was? What was the story that it was telling?
I mean, it's like
I watched it last night.
There's like an elven warrior, and she falls in love with a human mage.
Okay.
And they have a child, but they die.
Yes, that's an extremely important story, actually.
Okay. Well, I mean, I assume it had like importance, and that's why it was in there, but it's not as readily clear in the episode, like what the whole purpose of that is. So.
Yeah, I totally forgot what it was. I knew as soon as you started saying, I'm like, okay, yeah. And it's being told to Ciri, which is just hilarious. It really was. But yeah, I really liked that scene. It was pretty fun. It was cute. Just a neat story within a story. Them doing a story within a story is always neat. Fun. Yeah. Especially when your characters reacting to it. So.
And it was shot well. I liked the way it looked.
What's that well?
So now I think we want to talk about any like least favorite, worst scenes in the episode. You got one of those, Max? I mean, Glenn? No, you don't? None?
Nothing.
Nothing
really
for complaints.
There's nothing that I disliked enough to put it here. Because we haven't written a scene you most hated, and there's nothing I hated.
No, there's nothing
I disliked. So, yeah.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same. The only thing I could think of to say, and again, it's nowhere near hate, but like the very end of the episode where Ciri is talking about how she sort of feels like there's something wrong with her. The only thing about that was I felt like Geralt's response is maybe a little bit inadequate. Like I'm like, I mean, maybe Geralt just doesn't give very good advice, but he just talks about how like fear, basically, I forget exactly how he put it, but essentially like you shouldn't be afraid. Like that's your problem is being afraid or something like that.
Like fear is a virus, maybe.
So I don't know. Remember. All I can think is fear is the mind killer, which obviously that's not what he said. So that's why I'm like, I can't remember exactly his wording, but it was essentially fear is the mind killer that he said. And it just seems a little bit inadequate to like her basically saying, I feel like a monster. I mean, that's what I think essentially what she was saying is I feel like I might be a monster. And he maybe just didn't know how to cope with that. So should we do our actor shout outs?
Yeah. I mentioned it earlier, Christopher Hivju, Nordic actor. He's just great. It was weird seeing him without a beard. I'm like, I knew he was in it. I knew he was in it beforehand because I had seen who he was. I'd seen the casting announcement and who he was playing. I'm like, oh, okay.
He looks like a completely different person without a beard, 100%.
Yeah.
I had to second him.
Still sounds the same though.
I mean, I agree. Like he's did a wonderful job. Absolutely. And it's hard to act with all that, prosthetic and CGI
Thing
and
is,
stuff like that.
I was just thinking, I'm not so sure he's who wore that.
Why
Because
would you say?
seeing him walking down the hallway next to Geralt, he was Nivellen was significantly shorter than Geralt. And Christopher
Well,
Heavy's a tall guy, if I remember correctly.
but
Matt, could you check his height?
they could use a different person in those shots, right? Like where you see him
Yeah,
like walking down a hall, you could easily use a different person in a shot like that versus like him sitting at a table. I think you would want to use the actor.
probably they. Okay. But yeah, he's not. I don't think he's that much shorter than what's his name?
About an inch.
Superman. About an inch shorter than Superman. Okay.
Assuming their height list on Google is true, because
Right.
people lie.
Who did you guys think for best actor for the show?
Mine was the same one.
Christopher Heavy.
Mine too, but I'll also shout out my gal Tissaia because I think she did a fabulous job in this episode. I always like her, but she did a really good job in this episode. So
Yeah.
I don't know why I just like her so much. I think the actress is really good. Okay, so I think now we can talk about how the episode handled the themes. And I felt like it was really good on theme for me personally. My focus was on the theme of like, what is a monster? What makes a monster, makes someone a monster or something a monster. And you have that, with Nivellen, of course, he looks like a monster. And there's a lot of discussion about a monster is not because something looks horrible, right? So I think initially the impression you might have is, well, Nivellen isn't a monster, right? He looks like a monster, but he seems like intelligent and kind and all these charming things. But I think by the end you can say that he wasn't turned into a monster. Like the curse didn't turn him into a monster, but he kind of was anyway, because he did some monstrous things, and not just the R word that we talked about earlier, but also the fact, like he says at the end, he knew what his Brooksa girlfriend was doing to all these villagers. And he just, he kind of didn't care because she accepted him and she loved him. Well, that's kind of a monstrous thing to do. And then you have all these other questions about pretty much, a lot of the characters in that whole sequence, like, is the Brooksa a monster? Like that sort of, raises that question in that scene that she has with Ciri. And I think the thing that would point away from her being a monster, well, there's a couple things. One, she loves Nivellen. And two, she seems like she doesn't want to hurt Ciri. Like that, she shows some kindness to her and seems like she doesn't want to hurt her. But I thought it was noteworthy that right before Geralt kills her is the moment when she actually threatens Ciri and says, if you don't leave us alone, I will kill her. So that kind of takes away from a big, selling point that she had in the monster column by using Ciri in that way. So, and then I think there's then doubts raised about Geralt, as we've talked about before, like, is Geralt a monster? Nivellen says some things that suggest that, becoming a Witcher, turns you into a monster. And then after, or right as the Brooksa is killed, she speaks into Ciri's mind and says, he'll come for you too, right? So there's those doubts raised about him. And Ciri has doubts about herself, which she raises at the end of the episode. So I feel like that whole, it's not like we get a lot of definitive answers. You have Ciri herself saying a monster hurts people, does bad things to people. And that's her definition. But so we don't get a firm answer on it, but I think the question was well explored throughout the episode. And monster also to me suggests, this wasn't necessarily stated in the episode, but to me, to say that someone or something is a monster suggests that they're irredeemable, right? I think, maybe going beyond someone who's done something horrible, because, or as Ciri puts it, even does bad things to people. Like anybody's probably capable of doing a bad thing. And then, you know, is that person or thing redeemable? You know,
Right.
do they have other qualities? How do they feel about what they did? And so I'm not sure that that we necessarily saw any true monsters in this episode, but we certainly saw
Or
some.
maybe everybody's a monster.
Or maybe, yeah. I mean, it depends on your definition, I guess.
So, you know, my thoughts on this is like in the show, the Bruxa, for instance, I don't know that in the show that truly loved Nivellen.
Yeah,
He could have just been a free buffet.
it's possible. I mean, he loved her, I guess you could say. I mean, he lost. I think, you know, maybe for just the way the curse works, he would at least have to have loved her because he lost his love.
I thought she said it as she pulled herself forward.
Well, I mean, what she said though was basically, if I can't have you, no one can.
Right, and I think
a bit different than
that's not. I recognize that there was the other line though. I loved you, or something. I'm sure that's where she said it. It's like if she said it, my brain might be playing tricks on me, but I'm pretty sure when she said that to him, she also either before or after said, I love you.
Ciri said it also. Ciri said, it doesn't matter whether she was a monster or not, she loved you. After she died, Ciri says that. So I think we are supposed to believe that she did love him.
Yeah.
And, you know, from my perspective of knowing that the Bruxa are, I don't know that that was true on her part.
It's tough, yeah.
From playing the game.
Well, just in general, the whole vampire lore and like it could literally have just been a way to bring him in. On his side of things, it's like in the books, for instance, he after the events that led to him being cursed, it was kind of more of a theme in the book than the show, but he kept talking about all these girls that came over, and he said they were all consensual. Like he was lying to us that they were all consensual, and not that there was a power dynamic involved in this. You know, so he might be effectively gaslighting himself into being this good guy when he really is not at all. He keeps perpetuating the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
But he's lying to himself. And now he's lying to himself that he's in love with this Bruxa, who's using him as a feed bag.
I mean, again, I'm assuming there's some real feeling there just because of the way the curse is supposed to work. But that said, I'm not sure we see either of them, either Vereena or Nivellen, do anything that shows us love or shows us something good or kind. You know, I'm not saying that.
Do you think that's even possible for a vampire of any sorts?
I guess it depends on how you want to interpret that lore, you know.
Because was the princess he saved a Bruxa, or was she something else?
Wait, you say that again?
The princess he saved.
No, that was something else.
No, she was a
Striga.
Striga.
Yeah,
because they're all like kind of related.
Yeah, they're all forms of Eastern European.
Yeah, and
legendary.
I want to say he might have mistaken her for Striga in the books, and he's like, no, it's definitely a Bruxa.
Rusalka is what they were. Rusalka.
I thought it was something else. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that word is always stuck in my head because it's very similar in my head to a word that for a creature in E. Gabriel Kay's Tigana book. Tigana, there's a creature in there. That name, at least in my head, it looks like Rusalka. That's why first time I heard it, my brain went to that. I'm like, no, that's not right. And I just never bothered looking it up to see what the creature actually is in the other book.
You know, and speaking of consent, we have the events that happened to the one guy captured.
Oh yeah.
Cahir.
What Tissaia does to Cahir.
I say Cahir. I think they say Cahir on the show. The narrator say Cahir. I didn't know what he was saying for the longest time until I went to look in the ebook, and then it was Cahir. Cahir.
That he's just a guy to me. The guy.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah,
He really is kind of just the guy.
the
But
guy
you're right. I
Ciri's
mean,
terrified of.
Tissaia does do something pretty horrible to him. That is true.
And if you remember, Ciri's having nightmares over him,
Hmm.
basically PTSD at this point.
Hmm. Yeah, that always kind of bugged me. Like, is there supposed to be more to this that we haven't seen? Like,
Oh
what?
yeah,
Yeah,
it's stuff that she doesn't remember.
yeah.
Hmm.
So that's gives you the squicks, you know.
Well, not in the way you think. Let's just say that.
Well, that's how I mean it
I'm
just
trying to
Yeah.
remember.
The things she's not remembering isn't something that makes him look bad.
okay.
I think, don't they show that in the end of the
But
series?
she's has
TV show?
trauma, so you know.
The end of the season, he and Tringilla are confronted by Emrys, the Nilfgaard Emperor. I'm not going to talk about who plays. But yeah, them showing up in front of him, he turns around and, you guys screwed up because I was one of that, and this, and this. And yeah, I'm like, okay, both those characters have story arcs that are going to really be difficult now.
What else we got for themes?
The monster thing was the big one. I briefly mentioned a little bit of consent, and that's all I can really think of offhand right now for themes.
Okay. The first one that I wrote down was consequences of your actions
Mm-hmm.
and facing them. You know, and it's not just Nivellen who faced the consequences of his actions, not just Vereena facing the consequences because she was caught drinking from Nivellen's neck. You know, that's just no. But you also have it with Yennefer,
Mm-hmm.
and you know she's now going to face. You know, she's been captured because of what she did. You know, and that's what they're after. Also, okay, that's what I missed it. Facing consequences is another one. Is Tissaia. She begged Yennefer to fight, practically begged Yennefer to fight at Sodden Hill, and now she's walking around trying to find Yennefer.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it a bit more with Tissaia, I think, because you know she sort of orchestrated Yennefer's role in the whole thing. But then again, the consequences fall more directly on Yennefer than they do Tissaia. And honestly, as far as Yennefer goes in that particular scenario, I mean, what was she supposed to do? I mean, she was fighting for her life.
Yeah,
You know, I mean,
was,
you know, so I can't really see it as a situation where, you know, she effed around and
she
found out. Like she, you know,
she
what
could
else
have
was
gotten out of there.
she could have, but in some ways, like what she did was trying to help others, right? She wasn't looking out for herself in that situation. She was looking out for others more so because yeah, she could have left. Nothing could have stopped her from leaving. And instead she stayed, and the consequences are so far not good for her.
I
So
think I think she was there. I don't think she cared about the people she was helping save and protect. I think the thing she cared about was doing this for Tissaia.
uh-huh.
I could be wrong. I could be wrong, but I don't feel like at this point she really gave a crap about anybody else other than her friends that were there.
I mean,
You
she
know, it
acts like she doesn't, right? And like the way she talks, like, you know, you'd think she didn't care, but then why did she
she's
do it?
pissed off at the world.
You know, I mean, she is pissed off at the world, and she talks like, you know, she doesn't care. But why would she do it? You know, I mean, that's a case where maybe her actions speak louder than words, because I mean, those actions are not selfish.
Right? No, she did the right thing. I'm don't misunderstand. Think I'm saying she was wrong to do what she did,
Yeah.
but she did put herself in the pickle she's in by agreeing to help Tissaia, which is what I think her motivation was. It was help Tissaia and probably to a bit of an extent help Triss, because Triss is a good friend of hers.
Yeah.
I mean, and some of the other mages, I don't know how close she might be with any of them. She had never met Vilgefortz,
She doesn't really seem like she has many friends in general. So I mean, there's trysts.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, and she does care for Tissaia, like in a way.
Yeah.
She does.
It was Tissaia. Who in the book did they meet up in that city when Ciri got caught walking around with the boy? Remember when it was Tissaia and somebody else?
Yeah, they're right. There was somebody else there, but I don't remember the name.
Can't remember.
It was somebody else.
Is it someone that's even in the show? I'm not sure it is.
I don't think so. Not yet.
I just remember she was with a squire, and then she ran into some guy he knew.
Yeah, well, they ended up at Ciri and the end ended up somewhere with Tissaia, and they were all swimming in a pool and soaking in a hot tub.
Yeah, and there was another mage, but I don't know the name.
Yeah, I don't remember who it was. So that's pretty much all I have on there. Do we jump ahead to scores?
Yeah. Let's do our scores. You want to start us off, Glenn?
Yeah, for how close the adaptation was,
Mm-hmm.
I'll give it an 8.0. An even number, not a fraction this time.
Well, all right then.
But yeah, I'd give it an 8. It wasn't perfectly accurate, but other than adding stuff, it really didn't change a lot because the changes were all minor and pretty petty, petty change.
Interesting. Max, what about you?
I'd go with a 7.
Yeah, I think I'm more along those lines as well. I actually don't think it was super close, even though there are a lot of similarities if you're just looking at the one particular short story. But I think the changes that were there were pretty significant in terms of the overall impact that it had. And again, not in a bad way. I mean, I think it was an improvement over the source material of that particular short story. But I think it was fairly significant. Those differences that were there were impactful.
So the number I put on the screen is a 7.
I am going to be doing your fraction number, and I'll go 6.5. So there you go.
6.5. Fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay.
How much did we each enjoy the episode? As if it was our first time watching it and not having read the books. What would you say, Rebecca? Start with you.
I think, hard for me to say because I had read this before I'd seen it, that I would have perhaps enjoyed it less without knowing the source material. So, I might have been like a 6 on this episode. I might have been a little bit, just sort of wondering about, this tangent in this random guy's mansion, and then having, read the source material, I'd put it more at an 8.
I give as if I hadn't read, which is hard because I too had read the books before season 2 came out because I plowed through them last fall. So I'm plowing through them again, and I give it a 7.412.
You're killing me. Okay.
I have to write that down. And as my overall enjoyment, back to an 8. I enjoyed this episode. The short story, no, but for the most part, with all the problems this one did have, I still got quite a bit of enjoyment out of it. Mm-hmm. I think some of that enjoyment might come from the excellent CG. I thought the performance of the girl who played the Roxa, I enjoyed the storyline, her side of the storyline. Not happy with what's going on with Yennefer, but seeing more of her and seeing her, argue back and forth with Fringilla is always nice. But so yeah, I give it an 8. Last to you, Max.
Oh, like again, I didn't see this before read the books. because we were doing season 1
Right.
while this came out. And when I first read it, I was very confused. I'm like, where does this take place? I hadn't finished the books at that point, I believe, or I just somewhere along that. And so I'd give it at that point maybe just like a 7.
Okay.
Combined 7.5.
Okay.
So we all enjoy
Elements.
it more having the familiarity with the source material than we would have had without that. So that's interesting.
So I was like, you know, when I first watched it and I'd read the book and it wasn't like what's going on kind of thing.
Yeah.
That lowered it, but then like in retrospect, seeing like what actually how it changed and all that thing, all that stuff raised it a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Huh. I think that was everything, wasn't it, guys?
We covered it.
Wow, we can't believe we got through another episode. It was fun, but thanks for joining, everybody, and thank you guys for watching. I hope you come back next week as we continue with season 2 of Netflix's The Witcher. And I didn't catch the episode title. We'll get it to you. It'll be on the screen right above, about here somewhere. So thanks for watching, and don't forget to be awesome.